Today we're going to be looking at dihybrid crosses, which is looking at a cross or a Punnett square between two different traits. So we're going to look at what are the possible offspring that you can get with different combinations of two traits. Setting up a dihybrid cross is a little bit different than a monohybrid cross. So here's how it works. Step one, we need to find the genotypes of the parents. So it's super important that you list out what are the traits of two parents. Remember that when you're talking about two different traits, they've got to have 2 letters for each traits. So you're going to see a total of 4 letters for each parent. Then you need to come up with allele combinations by using FOIL. That's right, first outside, inside last. That math technique that you love so much, we're using it in genetics. I will explain how that works by showing you. But basically, you're coming up with all the possible combinations that could exist that go into the gametes, the eggs and the sperm. Then the third step is to place the different allele combinations in the Punnett square, and then you figure out what the ratios are. So let's try one together. So the first example involves human traits. So we're talking about widow's peak and tongue curling, which are both dominant traits. We're going to cross mom, who is heterozygous for both traits, and dad, who is heterozygous for widow's peak and can't curl his tongue. So let's start with mom first. So I'm going to do a little female symbol there. And mom is heterozygous for both traits, so I need to designate a letter for each trait. I'm going to do W for widow's peak, and I'm going to go T for tongue curling. Okay, so I'm going to use the letter W for the trait of widow's peak and T for tongue curling. So mom is heterozygous for widow's peak, so that means she's going to be big W, little w. Now I did W's on purpose because they are the same letters, right? Uppercase and lowercase, and I wanted to show you an example with that. So you need to make sure that you are underlining the uppercase ones so you don't get confused, right? So we have our uppercase W right there, and then the lowercase w because it's heterozygous. She's also heterozygous for tongue curling, so we're going to go capital T, little t there. Not the best capital T, but you get the idea. Capital T, little t. So that's mom. So the next step is to do dad. Dad is heterozygous for widow's peak, which means he has a big W and a little w. And he can't curl his tongue. That's a recessive trait. So even though it hasn't told me, I know that he has to be little t, because he can't curl his tongue. Notice how I wrote these. I kept the W's together and I kept the T's together. The W's I put first just because that's what they mentioned first in the problem, but it doesn't really matter as long as you stay consistent. If you started with your W's first, then you got to keep your W's first. If you want to use a different letter, that's fine too. Maybe you don't want to get confused between the uppercases and the lower cases, and you say, I want it to be the letter B. That's easy. That's fine. Whatever you need to do to help you get through. So now the next part comes with finding allele combinations by using FOIL. So I could just sit here and try to discover them and be like, well, I have to give a W, so I could give a big W and a big T. Let's see, so a big W and a little t, or a little w and a big T, little w, little t. But that might take some time to try to figure that out. So an easy way to do this is to use FOIL, first, outside, inside, last. Now you just do one parent at a time. So I'm going to start with mom, and I'm going to say, okay, mom is big W, big T, little t. So I'm going to FOIL the W's to the T's for mom. So it's just one parent at a time, the W's to the T's. So I'm going to say, okay, what are my first 2 letters? So my first 2 letters are big W, big T. Then I'm going to look at my outside letters. What are my outside letters? Okay, well, that's outside in the parentheses, so that's a big W and a little t. Inside 2, that's these guys right here. So these are the 2 that are on the inside. That's a little w and a big T. And then the last 2 letters of each section, little w, little t. So now I've come up with the 4 combinations using math. Now, if you like this, awesome, do it. If you want to just figure it out on your own, that's cool too. This just is a foolproof way to figure it out. So let's try that same thing with Dad. So he is big W, little t, little t. So if I'm going to FOIL, I'm going to put my W's together and my T's together. So first two letters in each parentheses is big W, little t. And then I have my outside two, big W, little t. My inside two, little w, little t. See why I've underlined these? You can't tell the difference between my W's. And then my last two, little w, little t. Now these repeat, but these are all the 4 combinations that could exist. So Mom's are 4 unique combinations, and Dad really just has 2 combinations. So I can use that to then make a Punnett square. So here's that same problem. So I made my Punnett square 4 by 4 because a dihybrid cross has 4 by 4. But if you'll notice, Mom had 4 combinations and Dad only had 2. So it doesn't have to be a 4 by 4, but I'm going to show you the 4 by 4 way first. So I believe it was big W, big T, and then it was big W, little t, and then it was little w, big T, little w, little t for Mom. For Dad, it was big W, little t, big W, little t, or I'm actually going to say little w, little t, big W, little t, little w, little t. So Dad had 4 combinations, 2 of which are doubled, and then Mom had these 4. This is where crossing gets a little bit tricky. So to figure out what goes in each box, I'm going to need to take these different allele combos, because remember, this is what could go in the eggs, right? So each egg up here, each egg has to have 1 W and 1 T that goes in the egg. Otherwise, like, you don't have hair or you don't have a tongue. So you've got to give 1 letter for each one. The same with the sperm over here. So when we combine them together, we're going to say, okay, this is big W, big W. Notice I'm putting the W's first because that's how I started with the problem. And then I'm going to say it's big T, little t. So I've looked at the ones, again, this is coming down here, this is coming down here. That would be what goes in that box. Okay, let's try another box. So I'm going to say this one here. So that would be, it's going to go down here and it's going to go here. So again, I'm going to keep the W's first. Now this time I went capital and then lowercase. And that's what you want to do. You always want to keep, if there's a capital W, you want to have that one first. So I get capital W, little t, and then capital T, little t. Okay, let's try some more. Okay, I'll do this one again, down this way with this one. So that's what's going in this square. Big W, big T, little t. And then this one. Right, so this one goes down to here. Big W, big T. Oh, it's a kind of an ugly big T, but big T, little t. So that's my first, that's my first column. So now I'm just going to do the second column. Again, the same way that I did. I'm going to go down here and put all of these this way, and then I'm going to go across with these. Right? So this one, big W, little t, little t. 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 Why don't you go ahead and pause and try to fill out the rest of the table. Okay, did yours look like this? So looking at this here, you can see that we have, there's one thing that I want to point out that it gets confusing. In this one, notice there's 2 little W's and then a big T and a little t. Notice I kept the W's first. In every single situation, my W's are first and then my T's, because that's how I set out the problem. So even though there are two little W's, and I told you capitals have to go first, the W's have to go first, I guess. So put the W's in the first position and then the T's, because that's what we started with in the problem. It'll make reading the Punnett square that much easier for you. So the next step is coming up with what is the phenotypic ratio for what's going on here. So I need to come up with the phenotypic ratio. So I could have widow's peak, and I'm just going to call it widows. I could have widow's peak. How about I just call it WP, widow's peak and tongue curling. I'll write it out for y'all. Widow's peak and can curl. Okay, I have widow's peak and can't curl. I have widow's peak, or no widow's peak, no widow. So this is can't, can curl, and then no widow, can't curl. So these are the combos that I have, and I need to come up with how many there are of each of these. So let's do this. If I'm looking for widow's peak and can curl, I'm actually going to color coordinate this. I'm going to make this one red. I'm going to try to make this one red. So I'm going to say, okay, I want this to be red here. Widow's peak and can curl your tongue. So if these are both dominant traits, so I'm looking for at least one big W and one big T. So I'm going to circle anything with a big W and a big T, and I'm going to do it with red so that I know what I'm doing. Notice I'm marking these as I go so that I don't repeat myself, and I can check my work when I'm done. So looking for big W, big T. Nope, this one has little t's. Little t's, little t's, little t's. Okay, big W, big T, yes, here. Not here, here. That's a little, I wouldn't know, but I see that they're both not underlined, so now I know that that's that one. We've got, and that's it. Okay, so then I would count up the number of red ones that I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and say, okay, I have 6. All right, now I'm just going to pick another color. Let's try green. So widow's peak and can't curl your tongue. That's dominant trait for W and little t's. So I'm looking for a big W, little t's. And I think there's a lot of those. Big W, little t, big W, little t's. I have to have 2 little t's for the recessive trait. Can't have just one. Big W, little t, big W, little t. I think that's it. So that's another 6. So now I've got to look for what is the possibility of me having no widow's peak and can curl. So I'm going to make that yellow here. No widow's peak means I have tiny little W's, but can curl means I have a big T. So here's little W's, big T, little W's, big T, and that's it. 2, which we can't really read because that's kind of hard to read, so I'll write it in black, 2. And then let's go with a nice blue. No widows can't curl, so littles all the way around. Here and here, there's 2 of those. Now, if you don't have colored pens, you can also do different symbols. Like I could say, I'm going to make a slash mark this way for those, and maybe with the yellows, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to slash these this way, and the greens, maybe I'm going to slash a different way. So maybe the greens, I would say I'm going to go like this, right? But so that you can still see your work. So if you don't have a colored pen, this is what I recommend, is doing some sort of system so that you know what you've done if you just have one color. Everybody kind of with me on that one. So using some sort of system so you can color coordinate this. Now 6, 6, 2, 2. If you've done math before, we know that that is not an acceptable ratio. that has all sorts of reduction that can happen. So 6 to 6 to 2 to 2 can be further reduced. I can divide everything by 2 and get 3 to 3 to 1 to 1. Okay? So this is my correct phenotypic ratio, 3 to 3 to 1 to 1. And I want to show you kind of a shortcut. Remember how Dad repeated? And I just repeated his other 2? You don't necessarily have to do that. Watch this. If I hadn't repeated, I could make these go away. So then that would be 3, 3, 1, 1. Then I wouldn't have to reduce my ratios. So it's up to you. If it's easier for you to think of dihybrids are always 4 by 4 and you just repeat the others, that's fine. If it's easier for you to make a box based on the combination, mom had 4, dad had 2, I'm going to make a 4 by 2, that works too. Whatever works for you. This is really tricky. So the next thing that I'm going to have you do is you're going to go back to the OneNote page and you're going to try a sample problem yourselves. You got this. Have a great day.